Our honored guest today is Douglas Preston, who was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He attended Pomona College in Claremont, California, where he studied mathematics, biology, physics, anthropology, and geology before settling on English literature. After graduating, Preston spent 8 years at the American Museum of Natural History in New York as an editor, writer, and manager of publications. In 1986, he piled everything he owned into the back of a Subaru and moved from New York City to Santa Fe, New Mexico, to write full-time. In his amazing career, Douglas Preston has published 36 books, and is it still 36?
It's now 40.
Okay, I thought it was more than that now, of both fiction and nonfiction, 29 of which have been New York bestsellers. Is that accurate?
I think 31 now.
Okay.
I'm just a hack writer.
A very popular hack writer. The Cabinet of Dr. Lang just came out #1 on the Publishers Weekly and #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. Pretty impressive, right? He's his co-author with Lincoln Child of the Pendergast series of 21 novels, the popular Gideon Crew series of 5 novels, and the Nora Kelly and Margot Green books, which are popular series as well. Fiction isn't his only forte. He's written nonfiction as well, including a history of Coronado's legendary search for the 7 cities of Cibola, true crime, one of which landed him in illegal trouble in Italy, which we'll get to hear about, and a nonfiction account of the discovery of an ancient pre-Columbian city hidden deep in the mountains of Honduras. In 2014, Mr. Preston founded the organization Authors United. He was one of the early founders of the International Thriller Writers Group, and he served as its co-president. He was appointed a Fellow of the Royal Geographical Society and was elected to the Long Writers Guild, an international association of equestrian travelers. He currently serves as president of the Authors Guild, the nation's oldest and largest association of authors and journalists. And there's a long list of awards and accolades that you can read about on his website, prestonchild.com. Please extend a warm welcome to Douglas Preston. So I will say right up front, I'm a bit of a fanboy, and I'll try not to gush too much. Okay. Many of our audience members are film students. Most of our audience members are film students here at Savannah Tech. Film is a collaborative process, and you've been in a successful collaboration that's lasted longer than most people's marriages. What's the secret of your collaboration with Mr. Child?
Well, it is a bit like a marriage. A bad marriage, because we always argue.
That could be a good marriage, it depends.
Well, but we figured out how to argue. One of the secrets of a marriage is you figure out how to argue properly with your spouse. And so Lincoln and I, over our many books, have managed to disagree in a way that doesn't lead to, fights. So the other thing is we're 2,000 miles apart most of the time, so we can't really get into fisticuffs. So maybe those are the reasons why we've been able to survive this.
Do you settle disagreements with a coin toss, or do you have a third party that settles them for you?
It's interesting. We've had, in the beginning, we had some really bad disagreements. We were absolutely at loggerheads over a scene. Mm-hmm. And I wanted it one way and he wanted it the other way, and neither one of us were going to budge. And it was when we were writing Riptide, and I remember the scene too. And finally we said, all right, let's just throw both scenes out and find a third way to do it. And that's what we did. And that third way was better.
That's great.
Because there was something wrong with each of our ideas. So now, since then, when we really disagree, that's how we solve it. We throw both things out and we start afresh.
And what is your process? Do you each write chapters and then send it back and forth, or?
Well, yeah, we do. What we do is we, do an outline up 15 chapters ahead, and then I'll take half of those under a certain character's point of view. He'll take another character's point of view and write those chapters. And then we swap, and then he rewrites my Shakespearean level prose, which is very distressing to me. And I have to completely rewrite his prose.
He's not here to defend. How does he make perfect better? I don't understand.
No, who was it, Faulkner, who said, you got to massacre your little darlings.
I've got that in here, yeah.
That's what we do. I massacre his darlings, he massacres mine, and I think what we get is something better.
That's great.
And it's very important that we trust each other's judgment. So when Lincoln says to me, Doug, I hate to tell you, but this is pure garbage. After I've gotten all upset and cussed him out, I have to accept that because I trust his judgment, and the same for him.
Speaking of killing your little darlings, you've killed off some characters.
Oh, I know, isn't that terrible?
Well, it depends. But it's a bold move to kill off a character that's popular with your readers. What goes into making that decision?
Well, we're talking about Smithback. May he rest in peace. Well, we decided to kill him off because we felt, well, first of all, we wanted the reader to realize that nobody is safe in our books. It's a real thriller. This is not, well, I love Michael Crichton. You can always tell at the beginning of a Crichton book who's going to die and who's going to live, because the good guys always live and the bad guys always die. Well, in our books, we thought, okay, we're going to scare the reader by killing off one of our most popular characters. So we did that, and we got 3,000 emails saying, I'm never reading another book of yours. How could you do this? And it was really distressing and upsetting to us, but we'd done it. We couldn't go back on it.
You kind of resurrected him in a way, didn't you?
Well, we kind of tried to, but nah. But yeah, with his brother, sort of. But then, we thought, another time we were thinking of killing off Margot Green. And we had such a bad experience with Smithback that I said, listen, Lincoln, we better do some research on this. So we went on this bulletin board where our readers talk to each other anonymously. We were lurkers. And I did this. And so I said, hey, I've heard a rumor that the guys are going to kill off Margot Green in the next book. Has anyone heard this rumor, and what do you think? Oh, the outrage. It's like, I'll never read another book of theirs. They're not going to do that again. Forget it. So we didn't.
Well, being from New Mexico, Breaking Bad was shot there. They were going to kill off Jesse in the first season.
Really?
And he was so popular, they kept him around.
Yeah, well, I think that was smart.
It was. Your writing is so esoteric, and it incorporates everything from anthropology to Zen Buddhism to quantum physics. Are you naturally that well versed in all those subjects, or do you and Mr. Child do extensive research for your books?
Well, both of us are kind of like information junkies. I mean, he has his areas of interest, I have mine, and so his areas would be like cryptanalysis and computers and tech, high tech stuff like that. Mine is more mathematics and both of us are anthropology and archaeology. Both of us come from families of archaeologists, so that's a big interest. But there are a lot of areas where we have to do research, but we're very good researchers. We do all our own research, and often, you see, when you do your own research, you often come across stuff that you never would have thought you'd stumble over the most fantastic stuff that's out over here and not what you're looking for. And that's why I would never hire a researcher, because they're only focused on one thing and they're not collecting stuff elsewhere. So yeah, we collect a lot of weird stuff, and then with very specific things we will do research on.
Who's the cosmologist?
I'm the cosmologist. Yes. Yep, I am. Yeah,
the most recent book, if you haven't read it, you should, deals with multiverse theory. And so, I mean, you get into some really deep details with how it would be possible.
Well, that's very interesting. I've always been interested in that subject: quantum mechanics, cosmology, black holes. The whole thing. So that was my idea. So Link said, "You write those chapters."
So you don't just go chapter after, alternating from one to the other. You'll take a group of chapters and work on those.
Exactly. And also, if they involve a subject like that, like Lincoln writes all the chapters on cryptology and computers, most of those chapters, and the characters who are involved in that, like Mime, is a character that Link invented. So we often divide things up not just by characters' points of view, but by subject matter. So.
Your film Relic was made into a feature film, and you've had several others optioned. Can you tell us about that experience?
You're all film students, right? Okay, well, I'm going to be honest with you. It was not a good experience.
I had a feeling you
Yeah,
might say
okay.
that.
I mean, I'll tell you. First of all, Lincoln and I was absolutely dead broke when Paramount comes to us and offered us $350,000 to make this movie.
Hard to say no.
Oh my God! I remember I was at a payphone. This is before the days of the cell phones. At a payphone in San Antonio, New Mexico, outside the Owl Bar. You know that place?
Green chili cheeseburgers.
Yes, the best ones. Anyway.
World famous.
Yes, and I heard the news and I was so happy. And boy, I'll tell you, I wish I had never ever taken that money. That's the devil's money, and I'll tell you why.
Please, yeah.
First of all, okay, there's a clause in my movie contract that says that if I criticize this film, even in casual conversation, that I will be liable not just for the money that I was paid, but for the entire $50 million cost of making the film.
No one will ever see this.
Okay, well, so I'll tell you, I just love that film. I think you get my meaning, okay. I mean, the director in that film, Peter Hyams, also insisted on being his own DP, and as a result, the film is dark, it is not lit properly, it was really, I think, a disaster in that regard. I think he's a good director, but he should have had a real he should have had you as a
think
DP.
so too.
Someone who really understands, anyway, but that isn't our beef. Our beef with Paramount is that it's been 27 years since that. First of all, they cut Pendergast out of the film, but they still own rights to his character.
Oh my God.
For 27 years.
That explains why there hasn't been another one since.
That's right, and Paramount has told us that they have no interest ever in doing anything with that character. They've absolutely refused to allow anybody else to do anything with that character.
God.
And our agency, WME, which is a powerful agency, went to Paramount recently, and Paramount said, no, we're not going to do anything with that character. So on the basis of that, they went out and found us a wonderful $1 million deal with Warner to do a television series based on Pendergast. And Paramount came in and squashed it. They sent us a legal letter saying, nope, you're not going to do that. We own that character.
That's just mean.
Yeah, they're like a toothless dog with a bone. And you try to take away the bone and it growls at you, but it can't chew the bone itself.
Wow.
So we're really upset with Paramount right now, and we're thinking of some kind of public shaming campaign, because it's so egregiously unfair that they, for 27 years have had their boot on our character's neck and have no interest in doing anything with it, but don't want to release it to anybody else.
I know. Well, and this is why I had a feeling that there was a story that went with that, because Stephen King can write a laundry list that gets made into a feature film. And you guys have a huge following that would eagerly go to the theater to see your films, and nothing's come out.
Well, it's incredible. We've had 21 New York Times bestsellers in a row, all in the top 5 with that character. And Paramount was like, oh, no, we don't think we can do anything with it. It's like,
That's crazy.
This is, you think that Hollywood is smart. You think that these people know what they're doing.
And have everyone's best interest at heart.
Right, but guess what? They are as much in the dark and at sea as everyone else. And nobody knows anything in Hollywood. Although they all have this wonderful facade of knowing what's going on, they have no idea. I mean, the same is kind of true in publishing, but at least in publishing, they're ethics, they're nice people. When they tell you something, they tell you the truth. In Hollywood, they don't tell you the truth. They may or may not be nice people. They're all extremely friendly. But as soon as your back is turned, they're like, that's schmuck or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had experiences with Hollywood executives who, when someone leaves a room, they turn around and say, God, I hate that guy.
Wow.
So
on IMDb, it says that Michael Bay has optioned another one of your novels.
Yeah, that's over with. That
Okay.
option expired.
Okay.
So
I was hoping we'd see.
I know it'd be fun.
A lot of explosions in one of your.
He's great. I mean, why not? He's really good with the explosions, and I think he's quite a good filmmaker, and but Pendergast is what we're really concerned with. I mean, we lost $1 million deal because of that, because of Paramount. So
I know.
that was
It's gotta
not
be frustrating.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. The Monster of Florence. One of your nonfiction titles was co-written with Italian journalist Mario Spezzi, Did I say that right?
That's right, you did.
It shows as being in pre-production on IMDb. Where is it in the process of finding its way into the big screen?
Well, that's going very well. The Studio Canal is a studio, the UK version of that. So it's not being made in Hollywood, which I think is appropriate, because I think it'll be a more sophisticated, more interesting, nuanced. It's a series, a television series, and Apple is producing it. And they've cast Antonio Banderas as Mario Spezzi.
Nice.
Although he's Spanish, apparently he speaks fluent Italian. And they haven't cast anyone for me yet, so.
Who would you like to see?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. You know, it's funny. At one point, George Clooney was going to play me.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, yeah. And my wife was very excited. She said, "Oh, because do you think I'm going to be in the film? You know, and do you think they're going to have sex?" I'm like, "What? What are you talking about? Stop that!"
Stop imagining that.
Anyway, but no, but he was going to play me, but that didn't happen.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, do you want to talk about why you are in the book and what happened because of it?
Well, it is an interesting story. Where to begin? I moved to Italy with my family, and I was going to write a novel, and in the novel there was going to be a murder. So I had to find out what happens when a dead body is found. How do the police in Italy react? So I contacted this guy named Mario Spezzi, who was the newspaper reporter who covered the crime beat for La Nazione, which is the local paper. And he learned where I was living, and he said, "Oh, did you happen to know that beautiful olive grove right outside the door of your villa was the site of one of the most horrific double homicides in Italian history?" And I said, "No, tell me all about it." My wife was not happy at all to hear this. And it's funny, the real estate agent never mentioned that.
Interesting.
But,
and they're so honorable.
But I was very interested, and it turns out it was a murder committed by a serial killer called the Monster of Florence, who had never been caught. And he killed 14 people in the beautiful hills of around Florence. Young lovers, young couples making love in cars. And he'd kill the man, and then he would drag the woman away. I'm not going to go into details, but it was really sick. I mean, this guy, you know, was worse than Jack the Ripper. But it was very interesting. It hadn't been solved. The case was still open. It had been the longest running criminal case in Italian history. They'd looked at over 100,000 men, and they arrested and had to release numerous people. They kept arresting someone for being the Monster of Florence, and then the monster would tease them and kill somebody while that guy was in jail, and then they'd have to release him and they'd arrest somebody else. And then he'd kill again, and he humiliated the police. So Mario and I decided to write a book about it. And unfortunately, our theories ran against the official Italian investigation, and they didn't like that at all. And then Mario went on Italian television and ridiculed the police investigation. Now, the police investigation went way off the rails. They thought it was a satanic sect that was operating in Florence since the Middle Ages, that needed female body parts for their blasphemous wafers and their black masses. I mean, it was a crazy, stupid, insane theory. But the Italians love that kind of stuff. Anyway, so the police got very upset with Mario going on television, and they arrested me, they arrested him. The way they arrested me was very interesting. They called me on my cell phone. They'd been tapping my cell phone. I couldn't believe it. They called me on my cell phone and said, "Where are you? We are coming to get you." And I said, "Wait a minute, who is this? Is this some kind of joke?" And he said, "No, this is all in Italian, but no, Mr. Preston, this is not a joke. We are coming to get you. It would not be good if we had to find you." So I met them, and they took me in for this interrogation in Italian, no interpreter present, no lawyer. And they accused me of being, of perjury, of obstruction of justice, and of being an accessory to murder after the fact, because I knew that Mario Spezzi was actually the Monster of Florence, didn't I? And didn't I know that he murdered this doctor and dumped his body in this lake? And it was absolutely insane. And the whole time I'm in this interrogation, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go to jail. But if I don't go to jail, this is going to make an awesome book. They expelled me from Italy. They arrested Mario. They accused him of being the monster of Florence. They threw him into prison. There was an international uproar, and so on and so forth. But that's the story. I'll just add one thing. Mario told me he knew who the monster of Florence was, and he had gathered all this evidence. And we were doing a magazine article at the time, and the editor said, well, if your writing partner thinks he knows who the monster of Florence is, you're journalists. You've got to go there and interview him, and you've got to ask him, are you the monster of Florence? And Mario said, I'm not doing that. And I said, well, we're not going to get published. The magazine won't accept the article. This was the New Yorker magazine. Will not accept the article unless we do that. So he said, well, I'm using a fake name. I said, you can't do that. That's against journalistic ethics. He said, well, we're in Italy. Journalistic ethics are different here. I'm using a fake name. So we went to this guy's house, apartment, at 9:45 at night to make sure that we got him there because we didn't want to call him ahead of time. He let us in, and Mario had used a fake name. And the guy looked at Mario and said, wait a minute. I must have misheard your name on the buzzer. You're Mario Spezzi. You're the guy who wrote all those articles about the monster of Florence. I've read everything you've written. We were like, uh-oh. That was a chilling interview. Oh my God. I'd never done an interview like that before or since as a journalist.
Do you see the one?
Well, we asked him, are you the monster of Florence? And I'm afraid his answer cannot be repeated on air. You have to read the book. But is he I don't know. But you know, the police had no interest in this. We laid out the evidence. It's all circumstantial, strong, but circumstantial. So is he the one? You know, I don't think you could convict someone in a court of law based on what we present, although it comes awfully close.
And he'll never say. Well, at least to the
He
authorities.
never will. Well, it's funny, the police went to him and said, don't you want to file criminal charges against these two journalists who are accusing you of being the monster of Florence? He said, no. He was like happy. He thought that was...
He was famous.
Yeah, he made him famous. And
any other repercussions from that, or is everything calmed down over there?
well, everything's calmed down. It's quite interesting. You remember that case of Amanda Knox?
I do.
The student, the American student accused
Spent
of
all
murder.
that time. Yeah.
The same prosecutor who accused me of being an accessory to murder and all this other stuff was the one who accused her of murder. And that was clearly she was clearly framed. In the Italian Supreme Court, finally, after she spent 4 years in prison, the Italian Supreme Court ruled that she was innocent and severely criticized this prosecutor, saying that the evidence was made up and sensationalized, and it was an absolute disgrace. But nothing happened to him.
And is he still in position?
He retired with honor.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like he should have been an author rather than a prosecutor.
He was really into the satanic sect thing. He not accused. He was the one this was his theory about the monster of Florence being a satanic sect, not just one person. But Amanda Knox was also a satanic ritual. That's why she ended up murdering her roommate in a satanic ritual. And the only evidence was, well, it happened on Halloween night, so it must have been, a satanic ritual.
He sounds like a seriously messed up individual.
He was a fundamentalist Catholic who believed. Well, first of all, he was a ferocious anti-Semite. You should see the websites in Italian where he had contributed to, with all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories. I mean, he's a crazy man. We have some of those here in our country too. But
Our share.
Yeah, but I mean, he was, probably I'm going to get a diffamazione for saying that on air, but I mean, he really is a crazy man.
Well, again, this stays with the students. So you're safe. So let's see. Your personal experiences described in your novel Lost City of the Monkey God were made into a documentary film. In it, you used LiDAR light detection and ranging, I had to look that up, to locate a lost city deep in the Honduran jungle. Can you tell us about that experience?
Well, sure. You know, I've been following this guy from the mid-90s named Steve Elkins, who is a filmmaker like you, or like you all want to be. And he had heard this story dating back to the time of Cortez of this lost city somewhere in the jungles of Honduras called La Ciudad Blanca, or the White City. And he conceived this idea that he wanted to find that city and film the discovery. So he went to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, which is a part of NASA, and he found a couple of scientists there who surveyed satellite imagery of this area of Honduras. The Mosquitia region of Honduras is one of the last unexplored places on Earth. These incredible mountains covered with thick, thick jungle, some of the thickest jungle in the world on these towering mountains. And it's just, no one has ever been in there. And so he had these guys at JPL look through this satellite imagery and do all this spectroscopic, analysis. And they found what they thought was something unnatural in this one valley that no one had ever visited. And that was in 1995. And he tried to organize an expedition in there for 10 years, or for a long time, more than 10 years. And finally, he learned about this new technology called LiDAR that can actually see through the jungle canopy as to what's on the ground. He raised $1 million. They brought a LiDAR plane down from the University of Houston, which has a very major research center there involving aerial LiDAR. Brought this plane down with all these researchers, and they flew this plane over this valley that no one had ever been in, and it only took 3 days, surveyed the valley, they processed the imagery, it came back, and oh my God, there we were staring at a city under this 150-foot jungle canopy. It's unbelievable. That was in 2012. And then in 2015, he ordered an expedition, organized an expedition, a joint Honduran-American expedition to go in there and see the city on the ground. And I was part of that. And it was really a fascinating experience.
You were somewhere that no human being had ever been.
For 500 years.
For 500 years.
Since the city was abandoned around 1500, nobody had been in there. And
it's amazing to think.
we could tell, we had ethnobotanists with us, we had all kinds of scientists. We had like 11 PhD scientists with us. And they all said, my God, this area is pristine, this jungle is pristine. I mean, it's so pristine that the animals had never seen people and would walk right up to you.
Wow.
That was scary. I mean, we had mountain lions, or pumas, just wandering around at night and roaring, and jaguars, and peccaries, and animals coming in at night. In my tent, I could hear these huge animals crashing. And then the monkeys, the spider monkeys, were furious that we were there, and they came in, and they were, a whole bunch of spider monkeys were in a tree above me, shaking branches and throwing flowers at me, because there were flowers in the trees, trying to get rid of me, and screaming, and because they recognized that I was a primate, and what was I doing there? And then when I didn't leave, they all sat on this branch for hours, staring down at me and eating these white flowers that were growing on the tree, just like popcorn. And I thought, oh my God, this is a zoo and I'm in it.
Well, the animals weren't the only thing to fear in that jungle, were they?
No, we didn't.
You ended up with some bad ailments afterwards.
Well, we did. Well, we had the first thing with the snakes. That area is infested with the fer-de-lance, which is the most poisonous snake in the New World. It's like 600 times more poisonous than a rattlesnake. And the first night, one of these giant fer-de-lances was coiled up under the hammock of one of the LiDAR scientists. I mean, it was big. It was, its head was the size of a spade, 3 feet off the ground. It was in striking position. It was at night. And I was the one who walked by it and, oh my God, and backed up. And so I called out to these 3 British guys who were leading the expedition as sort of the logistics guys. They're former SAS officers. I said, hey, you guys, there's a big snake here. And so the lead guy rushed over and he said, oh, blimey, I'm going to move it. I was like, he's going to move this. This snake was bigger than a person, okay? So he cuts this long stick with a fork in it, and he pins the snake with it. And the snake just exploded in fury. He was striking everywhere. And, you know, we were holding our flashlights on it, standing way back. And the venom is like squirting out of its fangs. The fangs were over an inch long. It was a scene out of a Stephen King film. And he worked this thing up behind the head of the snake. He'd obviously done this many times before. He grabbed the snake behind its head. And the snake was thrashing around so much it almost knocked him over. And it was trying to bite his hand, and it was twisting its head around and expelled venom all over the back of his hand, and his skin is bubbling.
Oh my God.
So he falls to the ground with the snake, pins it with his knees, and cuts the head off with his knife. But the head continues to snap and you know,
and it's still just as dangerous.
And spraying venom. So he takes his knife and stabs it through the head into the ground. Meanwhile, the headless snake is still fighting him too. And he's fighting with the snake, and finally he gets that under control. He washes his hands, and he says, "Nothing like that to concentrate the mind, is there?" So yes, we saw those fer-de-lances every day.
And if anyone had gotten bitten, there was no way that they would have survived, because you couldn't get out fast enough to medical attention.
Yeah, that's right. It was terrible. And as a way of showing us how dangerous these snakes were, he said he was working with a British explorer television personality. What was his name? Oh God, I can't remember. Bear Grylls. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you not to Google something. So one of Bear Grylls' producers was bitten by a fer-de-lance while they were in the jungle, and there are photographs online that show his foot after it was bitten. So Google Bear Grylls fer-de-lance bite, and you're going to see something just horrifying.
You'll never forget.
He showed this to everybody on his phone, and he said, "This is what's going to happen to you if you're not careful." And he said, "This is the best that's going to happen to you, because you're probably going to die. But the best thing is going to be, look." And I won't even describe it. It was the most awful thing I've ever seen. Anyway, so that was the day. But then we got out of the jungle.
Well, first of all, you found what you were looking for.
We did,
You
yes.
found this amazing civilization.
It was incredible. yeah.
Antiquities like nobody had ever seen before. Describe those.
Well, it was interesting. When we first got there, it was really disappointing. We couldn't see anything. The jungle was so thick. There was a pyramid there, and you could literally, from here to the wall, you could not see it. And so even though we had these LiDAR images that showed roads and mounds and terracing and pyramids and canals, you couldn't see any of that stuff. But at the base of the pyramid, we found this beautiful cache of stone sculptures, just the heads of which were appearing above the ground. We'd walk by it like 10 times before someone said, "Hey, what's this?" And there was this jaguar head coming out of the ground, carved in stone with its teeth bared. It was really dramatic. And then we found there were eventually, when they excavated, over 500 sculptures. But more than 50 you could see. It was really quite something. So that was really exciting. But then when we came out of the jungle, and everyone was so relieved that nobody had died. But our relief was premature, because all of a sudden, after about 5-6 weeks, we were covered with bug bites, and all the bug bites went away except one that started to get worse and worse, and it started to take over your body. It was like something out of a science fiction horror film, and nobody could diagnose it. The doctors were like, "Oh, it's an infection." Well, the antibiotics didn't work, and finally the National Geographic photographer had a friend who nearly died. He said, "Yeah, you guys have leishmaniasis. That's just what I had. I nearly died from it." So I went to a doctor in New Mexico. I called him up on the phone, and he was an expert in leishmaniasis. And I said, "I think I might have leishmaniasis." He said, "Well, take a picture of that lesion, this thing that's growing on me." It was right here, this horrible thing. And so I took a picture and I sent it to him, and he said, "Oh, yep, you've got it." He said, "You better go to the National Institutes of Health and talk to my friend Anthony Fauci. He'll take care of you guys." True.
Love it.
This was before COVID. So we all went to the NIH and we were enrolled in a study. The NIH is studying leishmaniasis. And we got treated for free, and I met Anthony Fauci. And it was really interesting, and we had wonderful doctors, and so we were treated. It's not a curable disease, but it goes away after a while.
Now, is it something that can come back randomly?
Yes, and it's highly contagious. You really have to. 15 feet is a safe distance. No, it isn't contagious. It's caused by the bite. It's like malaria. It's a parasite, but it's caused by the bite of the sandfly rather than the mosquito.
We don't have those here.
No, you don't have sandflies, do you?
Oh, we have tons of them.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have leishmaniasis yet, I guess.
If one finds you, just, you could be patient zero.
Well, there was an outbreak of leishmaniasis in Texas and Oklahoma from sandflies.
Interesting.
But there has to be a vector, an animal that's a vector. So it isn't just a sandfly, but there has to be a mammal that is infected with leishmaniasis that is a vector for the sandfly. It's kind of a really complicated thing. So in Texas, that was the rats were the vectors. So areas with lots of rats, some people were getting leishmaniasis.
Wow.
Do we have rats here? Or?
Oh, we've got everything here. Those little boxes that you see down in the alleys downtown, those are rat traps. What can you tell us about your search for the lost city of Coronado?
Oh, well,
because that was the horseback
that
ride,
was,
right?
yeah, that was interesting. That was when I was just starting out, and I'd moved from New York. I had a job in New York where I was being paid, and I decided I wanted to write full time. And I'd saved up some money, but not a lot. So I moved to New Mexico, where I thought, life would be cheaper. And I had this idea of, wow, Coronado, he was the first European to enter the American, to really explore America. He was the first one to do a land exploration of America. He launched this huge expedition looking for the 7 cities of gold, which he didn't find. And it was a failure, and then he went back to Mexico City. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to get on a horse and follow that route across Arizona and New Mexico and write a book about it? Of course, I'd never been on a horse in my life, that was stupid. But,
you still have saddle sores?
Oh, God, the nerves are all dead. But
That's a long ride.
I got a friend who was from Texas who knew about horses, or a little bit. And we got on horses and we rode 1,000 miles. And we just about killed ourselves. We packed our supplies. We didn't follow any roads or trails. We laid down the fences that we came to. We crossed 9 Indian reservations with permission. But we didn't get permission from the ranchers. But they were all cool with it. They saw us coming with horses, and we're dirty, and we had our pack horses, and they're like, "What are you boys doing?" And then we tell them, and they'd say, "Well, hell, I've always wanted to do that." They liked what we were doing. So they never said, "Did you cut my fence back there?" We never cut the fences. We laid them down.
Yeah. Now I gather you did not find the lost city, the golden city of
No, we
Coronado.
didn't. That was the Zuni Pueblo. The 6 pueblos of the Zuni Indians were what Coronado thought were going to be the 7 cities of gold. And when he arrived there, he was horrified and disappointed to find that they were mud pueblos. But he and his men were starving, and so they attacked Zuni Pueblo, a big fight, not to get the gold, but to get their corn. And it was a really terrible battle. It was the first major battle between Europeans and Native Americans on American soil, what would become America. And it was really the beginning of a really tragic episode in our history. And so we spent a lot of time at Zuni. And I talked to the governor of Zuni. I interviewed people there, and I said, "What did you think of this, Coronado coming and this whole thing? And now you're part of it in America. And how do you feel about that? How do you feel about being, this small group of 10,000 people with their own language and their own land in the middle of this giant country? that's of Europeans. It's a very complicated answer that I got. Not a simple answer at all.
Probably not.
No.
Yeah,
No,
because
very-
you think how complex that is for them. I mean, they must have mixed emotions about, everything that they gave away to become part of this country.
Exactly, and some of the things that they got. And the interesting thing about the Zunis are that their land was never stolen, although they had a much bigger area, but they weren't ever moved like so many Native American tribes, were moved, like the Trail of Tears, the Long March, these things were moved. They've retained their land. They actually retained their culture to a large extent. Only about 20% of them are Christian. The rest are still practice their, indigenous religion. Actually, a lot of them do both. And they've retained in their language, so they've retained a lot of their culture, which is, not true in other areas.
Very, very much so. Yeah, I went to Tibet, and I was fascinated with the fact that Tibetan art is very similar to Zuni art, and there's a lot of theories to go with that, and a lot of their language is similar. So.
Well, it's very interesting you should say that, because the Dalai Lama came to Santa Fe in 1991, and he met with Indian leaders, Pueblo Indian leaders, and I was part of some of these meetings. And you're looking at the Dalai Lama, and he had like 12 monks with him. That was his entourage, that was it. And then you look at the elders from, Hopi Pueblo and, the various Pueblos, and you think, they look so similar. There's a real affinity there in terms of just their physical looks. It was very surprising.
And yet they're so far apart geographically.
Well, the Indians, the Pueblo Indians remarked on that and said to the Dalai Lama, you look like us. What clan are you from? And he was like, well, we don't have clans in Tibet, but.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'd love to study that and just find out more about it. Well, let's see. Let's talk about your next to most recent book. That's in the Pendergast series. The next to most recent book was set here in Savannah. Has anybody read that? There you go. There you go.
Uh-oh.
You know what they did to Savannah. Bloodless had just come out last time you were at the Savannah Book Festival, and you were reluctant to talk about it. But can you tell the audience members a little bit about that book without giving away too much?
Well, let me just say something in my defense, because bad things happened to Savannah in the book, very bad things. I mean, the city is, parts of the city are trashed, fires and everything else. I won't say how, though, really, what happened. But, thriller writers write about what they love, write about destroying the things they love. And they write about the things that they're most afraid of is what they write about. So we love Savannah. My writing partner and I, we love Savannah. And it seemed like an appropriate, the horror of it, of destroying this beautiful city was, what we did. It's a city that everyone knows and loves. And it's such it's small, but has an outsized presence in our country.
Personally, you could have taken Charleston for all I can.
See, the trouble is I've never been to Charleston. So
Really?
No.
Well, we're honored.
I've been here quite a few times. But,
and Link spend a lot of time in town when you were writing the book?
we did. Well, when we were actually writing it, not when we were actually writing it, but beforehand, we spent a lot of time here taking photographs, going around, figuring out where things were going to happen. This is a huge open area. This is, that very large park that has the statue in the middle.
Forsyth?
Yes, Forsyth. Thank you, Forsyth Park. This is where we could really have mayhem happen. So there's a political rally there, and with a politician who's kind of unpleasant, and he gets his comeuppance.
In a wonderful way. Given the dimension of all your characters, your characters are very dimensional, very well drawn out, and the clever crafting of all your stories. As we discussed, I think there needs to be more of your work shown on the big screen. So is there anything that you haven't mentioned at this point that we can anticipate?
Well, we're trying to work things out with Paramount to get use of the Pendergast character again. And we're just hoping that they're going to do that, because otherwise we're thinking of launching a shame campaign.
Right.
Because I mean, it's really unfair. I think people would understand that this Pendergast is one of our greatest creations.
Absolutely.
And if they have no interest in it, and we're willing to pay them or even include them in the profits from the show, why would they say no to us? Why would they do that? That just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So,
Um,
but we do
let's-
have other, like the Nora Kelly series.
wonderful characters, yeah.
There's some interest in that in Hollywood, quite a bit actually.
Gideon Crew.
Gideon Crew, that was under option with Michael Bay, and that option expired, but hopefully, someone else will come along and renew it.
Let's talk.
So,
Many of our students are aspiring writers, and I'm sure you have some wonderful advice to give to aspiring writers. What's your most typical and best piece of advice?
well, let's see. I think, if you want to reach Carnegie Hall as a violinist, you practice every day.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it. If you want to become a writer, you have to write every day and you have to read every day. You have to make it part of your life, not 5 days a week, not just in class. And persistence is key, because I'm telling you, writing is so full of disappointments and rejection. I've been rejected so many times. And everyone who's a writer that I know has one or more manuscripts that were rejected sitting in a drawer somewhere. So you got to keep going. I had an editor who once told me some very good advice. He said, it's not a book, it's a career. So if you fail with one book or get rejected, just keep going.
And what's on the horizon?
Well, it's funny. I also write for the New Yorker magazine, nonfiction, and I've got a story that I'm going to be writing for them. I hope they seem to be interested, on the James Webb Space Telescope, which is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's an eye looking out into the universe that we've never had before as a species, and so anyway, I'm going to do a story about that, and about the mystery of Fermi's paradox and the great filter. You can Google that, Fermi's paradox,
I'll need to.
great filter. Interesting subjects.
Now, I mentioned it was the next to last novel was Bloodless, but the last novel was The Cabinet of Dr. Lang, which does not take place in Savannah, but is a continuation of the story that starts in Savannah. And it turns out to be a trilogy.
That's right.
Which I'm like really engaged in the story, and it ends. So it's a cliffhanger. It's your first cliffhanger, isn't it?
Everyone is complaining. How can you do this to us? I had one of my closest friends, she said, I was 7 pages from the end, and I thought, how in the world is he going to resolve this? Oh no. She turned and saw To Be Continued. She said, oh, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. You have to tell me right now what's going to happen. I said, nope.
Can't tell you.
Yeah.
Can't tell you. You got to buy the book.
Yeah. We don't even have a title for it, but Lincoln and I, we know what's going to happen. We just have to come up with a title.
Yeah. Well, I hope you haven't written yourself into a corner, because it's a really good cliffhanger. I mean, if you like to read, please pick up the book. And I believe they'll be available tonight, won't they?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think they will. But I mean, were you really upset when you got to the end? I mean,
No, I wanted more.
Yeah.
But I'm like, damn, I have to wait. I mean, sometimes, the anticipation is a wonderful thing, so.
Yeah, we're getting emails saying, oh, I know you're just trying to get me to buy another book.
Sure.
How dare you? I was like, no, we had a big story we wanted to tell. It's too big to fit into one book. It's got to go through 3 books. So.
Well, I have just lived my ultimate fantasy of interviewing one of my favorite authors of all time, and it's time to open it up to questions. Who's got questions?
For your public shaming of Paramount, are you thinking about doing that maybe documentary style?
We're not really, that's a really good question. We're not really sure. I'm not the only author in this problem. There are many authors out there. I'm the president of the Authors Guild. So I know a lot of authors there are quite a few authors out there where Hollywood has bought the rights to something and just stomped on it, and it's never going to see the light of day. It's not fair. It really isn't fair. So I think we're going to make this about, not just about me, but about the many authors that are suffering from this. And you may ask the question, why are they doing this? And the reason is very simple, that when they have let rights like that go, and somebody else has made a wonderful, successful series out of it or movie, the studio head says, wait, didn't we used to have rights to that character? Who let those rights go? And those people are fired. So what they're doing is they're covering themselves, covering their butts, so that they don't get fired. And they're afraid, Paramount is clearly afraid that if Pendergast goes somewhere else and becomes a huge hit, that all those people connected with letting that character go are going to be fired.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
I just feel like, if more people realize this and we can put pressure on it and maybe do away with it, we could just have, a plethora of fascinating films and series and things.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's very encouraging, because most of the writers I've talked to who are in the same boat as us are terrified of Hollywood. They're afraid that if they protest or say anything or make a noise, that they're going to be blacklisted in Hollywood. And you know what? I've reached an age where I don't care. I mean, I'm going to fight. We're going to fight. If Paramount doesn't do the right thing, and we've gone so far with them, made every effort to work with them. If they don't do the right thing, then we're going to go after them.
And you're not afraid of going after the big boys.
Well,
He's done it before.
I'm not. I'm already old enough that I don't care. I mean, if Hollywood blacklists me, fine. I have a lot of loyal readers, and they love our books, and they're not going to. In fact, we might even enlist our readers to help us. We have millions of readers, and I think that we're always being asked that question: when is why have we never seen a Pendergast series?
So readers and just anyone that sees this information would definitely rally behind it.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, thank you.
Can you talk about taking on Amazon?
Well, I took on Amazon. In 2014, Amazon was having a dispute with my publisher, Hachette. And to gain leverage, they stopped selling Hachette's books, or they made them very hard to sell, which was including my books. So I was at a Hachette party with Lincoln. We were a little cocktail party or something, and I was complaining about this Amazon, this huge this company bullying authors, and if they're having a dispute with Hachette, why are they dragging authors into this dispute? And Lincoln said to me, Doug, I'm sick of your complaining about this. Why don't you do something about it? So I did, and it turned out that there was this huge groundswell of support for this. We took out a double-page spread in the New York Times. Thousands of writers signed a letter to Jeff Bezos saying, look, stop punishing authors. I mean, every time you have a commercial dispute with a publisher, are you going to do this? Stop selling our books? That's not fair, because Amazon sells half my books. But I had so many authors say to me, oh, they're never going to sell another book of yours because you're going against them. That was not true. Amazon was never retaliated against me. But I think that our protest really helped Amazon and Hachette come to an agreement, because Amazon was way over here, and I think they moved somewhat in the negotiations. Hachette moved, and they came to an agreement. But the one thing Amazon has not done since, I don't think, is stop selling authors' books to punish their publisher.
Good.
That's something they're not going to do again, because that got them into trouble.
That's awesome.
Back to Hollywood. Hollywood's not the only game in town.
But if they own the rights,
Well,
they
no,
own the
that's
rights.
for future work. I mean, you were talking about, you're afraid to go with Hollywood because of working with Pendergast. So you have a whole bunch of other books that aren't Pendergast, is that right?
Well, that's right, yeah. And
So you wouldn't approach Hollywood those, because they do what they do, but there's gazillions other production companies.
well, that's right. Like The Monster of Florence is being produced by Studio Canal, which is French-based, or it's really European-based studio. It's not a Hollywood studio.
Right.
So I feel good about that because, I think that well, so far working with them has been much better than working with Hollywood. Although I've had good experiences with Hollywood too. I'm not saying, not everything's been bad. I had another movie produced by Disney called The Jenny Project out of one of my books. And I was co-executive producer myself of a made-for-television movie for ABC called Superfire, which was about a forest fire. And those were good experiences. So.
And you've got your one-offs, which are wonderful books. You're.
That's right, yeah.
And again, those should be optioned.
Some of them are under option. You
Okay.
get a lot of stuff that gets optioned. I mean, the book that Lincoln and I are just finishing up now is called Dead Mountain, and it's a Nora Kelly book. And that book has an interesting history. I wrote an article in the New Yorker magazine about this strange death of 9 skiers in the Ural Mountains in 1959 in the Soviet Union. And it's one of the great unsolved mysteries dating back to the Soviet era. It's really bizarre. And so I wrote an article about that for the New Yorker because the Russians had just reopened the investigation and they did all this research on it. They looked at all the files. They went back to the place where it all occurred, trying to figure out how these 9 people had died. And it got optioned. And I got a wonderful movie deal. And just as I was signing the contract, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the studio said, "No, we're not doing anything. We're not touching this," and killed the deal.
Oh, yeah.
So I said to Lincoln, "Listen, this is such a great story. Let's move the action from the Ural Mountains to the Manzano Mountains of New Mexico, and build a novel around this really crazy set of circumstances."
And that's what you did.
That's going to be Dead Mountain.
I love it. I love it.
How did you and Lincoln meet? So you were working in New York, you packed all your crap and said, "I'm out of here," and moved to New Mexico. How did you and him meet and decide to collaborate? It's just amazing to me, the length and breadth of success that you two have had together.
Well, thank you very much. Well, actually, we met when I was living in New York, and I was working at the Museum of Natural History, and Lincoln was an editor at St. Martin's Press, and he wanted a book about the museum. And so he started looking around, and I wrote a column in the museum's magazine, and he read that and said, "Oh, this guy can write." And so he asked me to lunch at the Russian Tea Room, a very fancy restaurant. I had to go to the Salvation Army to get a jacket to get in there. And he proposed this book. So I wrote a nonfiction book called Dinosaurs in the Attic, which he was the editor of. And when it was all done, he said, "Doug, this museum is the scariest damn place. We should write a thriller set in this museum." And I said, "Well, I don't know how to write a thriller." He said, "Well, I do." He said, "I've read so many bad thrillers as an editor that I know exactly what not to do." So we wrote this thriller together, and it was called Relic. And then it became a movie, and we had so much fun doing that we wrote another and another and another, and pretty soon it was this partnership.
That's wonderful, that's lasted this long.
Well, thank you.
Personalities and egos haven't apparently gotten in the way where you see so many bands that those egos just blow up and they can't contend with each other and the band just implodes. It's nice to see the durability of the relationship.
Yeah, it really is nice. We published 30 books together with just a handshake, not even a piece of paper. We really trust each other. We are very close friends as well as being collaborators.
That's fantastic. And my wife here you hear it all the time, but biggest fan. She devours your books.
Well, I commend her literary taste.
My mother-in-law turned me onto your books, and it's the nicest thing she ever did for me. How'd you get top billing?
Well, in the beginning, first of all, the agent that Link had found said, "Well, we've got to put Doug's name first because he's published a book and you haven't." And then the way we started out, I was the writer, and Link would do the rewriting and the editing. So that because I was the lead writer, my name went first. And then it just stayed that way. You know,
It has a nice ring to it. It works.
Preston and Child. First of all, it was Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. And then in England, they didn't think that the British people would buy a book written by two people, so they called us Lincoln Preston.
Before you actually get into the process of writing another edition of your book, where and why you get your ideas from?
Where do we get our ideas? That's like one of the hardest questions to answer, because they come in weird ways. Like the idea for this novel that we're working on now, Dead Mountain, came from my interest in this strange thing that happened in the Soviet Union, which I've been following for 10 years. It's kind of a mystery. There have been a couple of books written about it. And it was when I got rejected for when they killed the movie deal, I was like, whoa, this would make a novel. Another idea came from, I wrote a lot of my ideas come from nonfiction pieces I write. Like I wrote a story about the Oak Island treasure. Does any of you know about that? It's now a reality television show. But back in the 80s, I was really interested in that story. I went to Oak Island in Nova Scotia. I spent 10 days with the treasure hunters who were crazy. And I wrote a story for Smithsonian Magazine. And Link read that story and he said, Doug, this would make a novel. This was 2 or 3 novels into our partnership. He said, we'll move it to Maine, and we'll do this and we'll do that, and we'll have this character and that character, and so on and so forth. And we'll have this thing buried down there that will be a big surprise. And it was like, whoa, and that became our novel, Riptide. And that we sold to was it 20th Century Fox. And they bought that. They paid a huge amount of money for that book, and they never made the movie. It's kind of sad. Yeah, going to the bank with that check wasn't a shame, but the rest of it was.
It's still cash just the same.
Did you know with the first Pendergast book that you guys really had something, or did it take a few books for it to sink in and be like, this is our guy?
It took a few books to sink in. With Pendergast, he kind of came out of left field. We didn't really realize what we'd done with that character. But when our readers started coming to us and saying, oh, that Pendergast, oh my God, what a great character. We're like, really? You think so? And, yeah. And then when it was cut out of the movie, we heard from all our readers, thousands of them, why did they cut him out of the film? Why did they do that? How could they have done that?
I think maybe we should start a Twitter campaign, #FreePendergast.
Yeah.
I kind of like
I
that.
like that, Free Pendergast.
And
I love that.
You've,
Tweet Paramount every day.
Yeah.
you've got a great website with a lot of followers.
Yeah.
I think if you put up the call to action, you'd have an avalanche on your hands.
Well, free. I love that idea. That's a good idea. What an inspiring group. Yeah, we are going to really do everything we can to exhaust our conversations with Paramount. I mean, they are dragging their feet. They've been so rude to us. They've actually been rude to our agents. Now, we have WME, which is the most powerful agency. And I said to them, I said, do you let Hollywood studios treat you this way? And they said, well, not normally. And I said, well, aren't you upset? They said, yeah, we are upset. And I said, well, aren't you going to do anything about it? Oh, we're going to work it out. We're going to work it out. Work it out then.
It's time to stand and fight.
That's right.
That's right. Well, it's unfair. That's what it kills me. It's just unfair.
And it makes no sense either.
I know.
Because if they're worried about not being in on the financial gain, it sounds like you've already provided that avenue to them. So what the hell's the problem? That's what I don't understand.
Well,
Right.
that's our agents are now working on that particular thing right now, because we had said, look, we'll give you back the money for the movie. They were like, $350,000. That's chump change. It was like, well, you paid us that to begin with. It's like
Jumps that.
they were telling us, oh, we're going to pay you so much money. Well, believe me, when you're making like $10,000 a year and someone offers you $350,000, Oh boy, it was like I was so happy to get that money, and my wife was happy, and our little daughter, baby daughter, wasn't old enough to be happy, but it made her life different. But anyway.
Did your wife ever get to go on your excursions?
Oh, she does go a lot, yeah. She would have come here, but she's got a father who lives in West Virginia who's kind of ailing, so she's there with him now. So.
They don't realize they're sitting on a franchise.
Yeah.
Well, that's my point. That's just, but you know, Paramount Plus is their television thing, and they've got that show Yellowstone in 1923, and that's I think the most popular show on television right now. And they have no interest in doing anything else. That's it. They're going to focus on that. They're spending like $15 million an episode, and those are, good shows. I mean, Paramount knows what it's doing. They're not, so, they're distracted, I guess.
Any other questions?
For a first-time novelist, what would be your advice? Should you submit to an agent or should you submit to a big publishing house with your manuscript?
Well, that's a good question. Submit to an agent. You should submit to an agent first. If you're going for one of the big commercial publishers like Hachette or Macmillan or, Penguin Random House, submit, find an agent. And then what you're buying with an agent are all the connections that you don't have. Because you don't have lunch with senior editors at publishing houses, So with an agent, you need to get those connections. And a legitimate agent will charge you 15% commission on the money he or she makes for you, but doesn't charge you up front. So you don't have to pay anything until the agent actually makes money for you. So I'd avoid any agent who wants to be paid up front, because there are a bunch like that. They are not, that's not ethical. So you know what you should do if you're interested in finding an agent, go to the Writer's Digest website and they have a lot of advice about how to find an agent. There are certain websites of independent agents who are looking for clients. You can look at them. And what else can you do? You can go to the Authors Guild website, which has all kinds of advice for aspiring authors, about how to get published. So.
Now, if you have a manuscript already, you would want to find an editor maybe first?
Well, it depends on how good, how secure you are with that manuscript. If you think it needs editing, my advice is if you're just starting out, to form a writer's group. Get together with 3 or 4 or 5 serious friends and critique your work. So rather than hiring an editor and spending money, you get your friends who are smart, like everyone in the class here, who are studying these things, to critique your work. And that way you can get some feedback without having to pay $100 an hour to some editor.
What about self-publishing?
Well, it's interesting. Self-publishing used to be kind of, oh, you don't want to do that. But boy, I'll tell you, people like, or Michael Grumley or Colleen Hoover have made millions of dollars and huge audiences self-publishing. So you can self-publish. Yes, you can definitely do that. That is an option. And if you have a very good social media platform, like Colleen Hoover's got her like 1 million TikTok followers, you can publish on your own and do very well. Yeah. Hard to do, it's hard. 1 in 1,000 makes it, but that 1 in 1,000 might be in this room. Even more than 2 maybe.
One last question. The time.
All right. Have you ever experienced writer's block? And if you did, how did you get through it?
Yeah, writer's block, that is a problem. The way I get through it is by just writing. It's like exercise, it hurts. And if you've been out not exercising for a while, it really hurts and you don't want to do it. But if you force yourself to do it, even a little bit, it works. Now, most writer's block that I've experienced myself and that other people that I know have experienced are caused by people thinking that what they have to write is so important, and every word has to be perfect, and every, and they start writing and it's not perfect, it's not even good, and they stop, they freeze up. But that's even the best writers, their first draft is terrible. You got to get it down on paper, and once you've done that, then the real writing comes in the rewriting, and that's how you solve your writer's block. Even if it's terrible, just get it down on paper.
I had someone steal my laptop that had something that I've been writing for 4 years, and I can't write anything after that. It was like,
That's such a violation. I
It's
can
terrible.
understand.
My daughter is a writer. Well, she's a lawyer, but she wants to write. But she had her laptop stolen with a novel on it, and it was a terrible, terrible experience. She was, in high school. You're obviously much older than that, but it was a horrible experience.
And I recommend thumb drives.
Yeah, flash drive.
People who have manuscripts on computers of any sort, put a copy on a thumb drive or two.
Can we ask one very last question?
Fine with me.
Pendergast, how did you guys come up with him? Because he's the second most incredible man ever.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's good. That's very nice.
Did you get sick and tired of hearing about him?
No, I never get tired of hearing about him. I don't know. He's so real to me. He's more real than many allegedly real people I know. I don't know where he came from. What happened was, and I think Lincoln and I will talk about this tonight, Lincoln said to me, we're writing Relic, and he said, write the first few chapters. We'd figured out what was going to be in the chapters. I wrote them, I sent them to Lincoln. He called me up and he said, Doug, these are great chapters, but these two cops you've got this Irish-American cop and you got this Italian-American cop, and they're both NYPD, they are the same character. So, what I think you should do is meld those two characters together, and then we need to come up with a detective who is so unusual, that nobody has ever seen before. Now, by this time, I was so angry at him and so pissed off at his advice that I very sarcastically said, "Oh, like we need an albino from New Orleans." And Lincoln said, "Now wait, let's spin that one out." Well, he's not albino, he's just very pale. And the first thing we decided was he'll be very pale and he'll wear black suits, and when he's at the crime scene, they'll think he's the Undertaker. Oh yeah, okay. And then we started talking about the character, and and pretty soon he was standing right there in front of us. So.
And he's evolved over time.
He has, yeah.
I mean, he's showing cracks in his veneer right now.
Yeah, he is. He's showing that he's not a Superman.
Mm-hmm. That's got to be fun to write your character and give him a little more, depth every single time.
Yeah, you have to be careful because then people complain. Oh,
he wouldn't do that.
Yeah, he wouldn't do that. Yeah, he's so.
Well, this has been a wonderful thrill. Any last thoughts that you want to share before I wrap it up?
Well, I just want to thank the class for coming. You guys are great. The questions have been fantastic, and the fact that you showed up on your day off from school is a really good sign that you're going places. So, congratulations.
And let's thank Mr. Preston for his generosity in joining us today. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
It's been a pleasure.
Yes, my pleasure.